When I showed up for dinner with just us, there were 23 guests, balloons, and a banner. "Congrats on baby Amelia." My sister smiled. My mom said, "We used your bonus. It was for the family anyway." I just nodded. That night, I froze every linked account, reversed 5 transfers, and pulled back the entire $9,500. By the next day, they realized something about the deed had changed, and the calls started flooding in. I, 32M, thought I was walking into a quiet family dinner when my sister texted me about getting together at Mom's house. She said it would just be us 3, maybe order some pizza, and catch up. I had just received my annual bonus from the tech company where I work as a senior developer, and honestly, I was looking forward to a low-key evening after months of overtime projects. The moment I pulled into the driveway, I knew something was off. Cars lined both sides of the street, and I could hear music and laughter coming from the backyard. My stomach dropped as I walked around to the back gate, finding 23 people gathered around tables decorated with pink balloons and streamers. A massive banner hung between 2 trees reading "Congratulations on baby Amelia" in glittery letters. My sister stood in the center of it all, one hand resting on her 6-month belly, beaming as relatives and family friends surrounded her with gifts and well wishes. She spotted me first and waved me over with that same smile she'd used to get me in trouble when we were kids. Mom appeared at my elbow, practically bouncing with excitement. She told me how wonderful the party was and how everyone was having such a great time. Then came the punch to the gut. She mentioned casually that they had used my bonus money for the celebration, explaining that it was for family anyway, and family should come first. I stood there processing what she had just said. $9,500. My entire annual bonus that I had been saving for a down payment on a house. The money I had worked 60-hour weeks to earn, staying late debugging code, and managing impossible deadlines. Gone. Spent on a party I knew nothing about, celebrating a baby that wasn't mine. My sister walked over, still glowing with pregnancy hormones and party excitement. She thanked me for being so generous and told me how much it meant to her that I would do this for my future niece. She said she knew I would understand since I was the successful one in the family, and this was what family did for each other. I nodded. I smiled. I congratulated her on the beautiful party. Inside, I was calculating exactly how they had accessed my money. 3 months ago, when Dad had his heart attack scare, I had added Mom as an authorized user on my main checking account, so she could handle any emergency medical expenses if I was traveling for work. It was supposed to be temporary. It was supposed to be for emergencies only. I stayed for exactly 47 minutes, long enough to not cause a scene, but short enough to maintain my sanity. I hugged my sister, told her the party was lovely, and mentioned to Mom that I had some work calls to catch up on at home. Everyone was too busy enjoying the celebration to question my early departure. The drive home was silent except for the sound of my phone buzzing with notifications from my banking app. Transfer after transfer had gone out over the past week. Catering, decorations, a rental company for tables and chairs, a photographer, even a down payment on some kind of professional party planning service. They had spent my money more efficiently than I spent my own. Back at my apartment, I opened my laptop and logged into every financial account I owned. The damage was worse than Mom had initially let on. They hadn't just spent the bonus. They had dipped into my regular savings, pulled money from my emergency fund, and even used the account where I automatically deposited money for my future house down payment. But here's what they didn't know about their successful tech brother. I'm not just a developer. I handle financial systems integration for my company. I understand exactly how money moves between accounts, how transfers work, and most importantly, how to reverse them. I started with the most recent transactions. 5 major transfers had gone out in the past 72 hours, all to various vendors for the party. Each transfer was still within the dispute window. I called my bank's after-hours line and explained that I had not authorized these transactions, which was technically true since I hadn't authorized them. Mom had. As an authorized user, she had the right to access the account, but she had exceeded the scope of what we had agreed upon. The banking representative was sympathetic and professional. Since the transfers were recent and I was disputing them immediately upon discovering them, they could place holds on the funds while they investigated. This would freeze the money wherever it currently sat and prevent the vendors from accessing it until the dispute was resolved. Next, I removed Mom's authorized user status from all of my accounts. Every single one. checking, savings, investment accounts, credit cards where I had added her for the medical emergency situation. I should have done this months ago when Dad recovered, but I had trusted family to not abuse the access. The most satisfying part came next. 3 years ago, when Mom and Dad were struggling with their mortgage after Dad's hours got cut at the factory, I had helped them refinance their house. The new mortgage was in my name with them as co-signers because my credit score and income qualified for better rates. We had agreed that they would make the payments directly to me, and I would handle the actual mortgage payment to the bank. It saved them over $400 a month. What they had forgotten, apparently, was that this arrangement meant I was the primary name on the deed. I was not just a co-signer. I was the legal owner of their house, with them having residency rights as long as they made payments. I called my lawyer, someone I had worked with on business contracts before. I explained the situation and asked about my options. He confirmed what I suspected. Since they had violated our financial agreement by accessing my accounts beyond the scope of our emergency arrangement, and since they had failed to inform me about major expenditures that affected our family financial planning, I had grounds to modify our housing arrangement. I didn't want to kick my parents out of their house, but I wanted them to understand that actions have consequences, and that my money was not a family ATM they could access whenever they felt like throwing a party. The lawyer drafted a formal notice that the deed was being transferred to a trust, with me as the trustee and them as beneficiaries. They could continue living in the house and making their regular payments, but any major decisions about the property now required my approval as trustee. More importantly, it served as a legal paper trail showing that our previous informal arrangements were being formalized due to recent financial complications. By midnight, I had reversed all 5 major transfers, frozen 3 credit cards that had been used for party expenses, removed all authorized users from my accounts, and filed the deed modification with the county records office. The beauty of electronic banking and online government services meant that most of these changes would be reflected in various systems by morning. I went to bed feeling something I hadn't felt in years when it came to family interactions: control. The first call came at 7:30 in the morning. Mom, panicked and confused, saying that the caterer had called asking about a payment issue. She asked if there was something wrong with my account and whether I could call the bank to fix it. I told her I would look into it and hung up. The second call came an hour later. My sister, no longer sounding quite so glowing, explaining that the photographer was demanding payment before releasing the digital photos from the party. She asked if I could handle it since I had been so generous with everything else. I told her I was dealing with some banking issues and would get back to her. The third call was from Dad. The mortgage company had sent an automated notification that there had been changes to the account and deed information, and he wanted to know if I knew what that was about. I told him we should probably sit down and talk about our financial arrangements since there seemed to be some confusion about boundaries and expectations. Update 1. By noon, my phone was buzzing constantly, not just from immediate family, but from relatives who had been at the party and were now hearing that there were payment issues with some of the vendors. Apparently, word was spreading through the family network that something had gone wrong with the party financing. My sister showed up at my apartment around 2 in the afternoon. She looked tired and stressed, which made me feel a brief moment of guilt before I remembered the $9,500. She asked if we could talk, and I let her in. She sat on my couch and immediately started crying. She told me that the photographer was threatening to delete all the photos if payment wasn't received by end of business day. The caterer was demanding the remaining balance and threatening to send the account to collections. The party rental company had already dispatched a truck to pick up their equipment since the payment had been reversed. I listened to everything she said. Then I asked her a simple question. Did she know where the money for her party had come from? She admitted that Mom had told her I was paying for it. She said she had assumed I had offered, the way I had helped with Dad's medical bills and their mortgage situation. She said she thought it was my way of celebrating becoming an uncle. I asked her if she had thought to check with me directly, if she had considered asking me instead of just assuming. If $9,500 seemed like a reasonable amount for someone to spend without discussing it first. She got quiet. Then she asked what I wanted her to do about it. The party had already happened. People had already celebrated. The vendors had already provided their services. She couldn't exactly unhave a baby shower. I told her she was right. The party had happened. But the assumption that my money was available for family use without my consent was going to stop happening. I explained that I had worked for that bonus money, that I had plans for it, and that taking it without asking was the same as stealing from me. She asked if I was really going to let the photographer delete all her baby shower photos over money. She asked if I was going to let vendors send her to collections when she was pregnant and stressed. She asked if this was really how I wanted to treat my pregnant sister. I told her that those were consequences of decisions that had been made without my input. I said that if she wanted the photos and wanted to resolve the vendor issues, she and Mom needed to figure out how to pay for the party they had planned and executed. She left my apartment crying harder than when she had arrived. Update 2. The Real explosion came that evening when Mom called, no longer sounding confused or panicked, but absolutely furious. She had spent the day dealing with vendor calls and trying to figure out what had gone wrong with the payments. She had also apparently been to the county records office and discovered the deed modification. She accused me of being petty and vindictive. She said that family was supposed to support family, and that my reaction was completely out of proportion to the situation. She said that the money was just sitting in my account anyway, and that it was going towards something meaningful and important rather than just accumulating dust. I let her finish her rant. Then I asked her if she would like to know how much money she had actually spent from my accounts. She said she knew it was the bonus money, around $9,000, and that I was acting like it was a fortune. I read her the total. $14,700. Between the catering, photography, decorations, rentals, party planning service, flowers, custom cake, balloons, favors, and various other expenses, they had spent nearly $15,000 on a single party. She had gone beyond the bonus and dipped into my other savings accounts to cover the costs. The silence on the phone lasted almost 30 seconds. I continued reading. I told her about every single transaction, every vendor, every expense that had been charged to my accounts over the past 2 weeks. Some things I hadn't even known about, like a premium floral arrangement that cost $600 and custom party favors that cost $300. She tried to defend it by saying that this was her first grandchild and that it was important to celebrate major family milestones properly. She said that I didn't understand because I didn't have children of my own, and that when I did, I would appreciate what she was trying to do. I told her that whether or not I had children was irrelevant to whether or not she had the right to spend my money without asking me. I told her that the amount of money she had spent was more than many people's monthly salaries, and that she had spent it on a single afternoon party. She asked what I expected her to do now. The party had happened, people had enjoyed it, and my sister had a beautiful celebration for her pregnancy. She said I was trying to ruin a happy family moment over money. I told her that I expected her and my sister to figure out how to pay the vendors they had hired. I told her that I expected them to understand that my financial accounts were not family property. And I told her that until they could demonstrate that they understood appropriate boundaries, our financial arrangements would be strictly formal and legally documented. She hung up on me. Update 3. The next few days were a masterclass in family drama escalation. My sister had apparently called every relative who had been at the party to explain that there were payment issues and that some of the vendors might not fulfill their obligations. This led to a network of family members calling me to ask what was going on and whether I could just work things out with the vendors. My aunt called to tell me that my sister was stressed about the pregnancy and didn't need financial drama on top of everything else. My uncle called to suggest that family disputes should be handled privately and not involve outside businesses. 2 of my cousins called to ask if there was anything they could do to help resolve the situation. The most interesting call came from my grandmother, Mom's mother, who is 84 years old and has very firm opinions about family dynamics. She asked me to explain exactly what had happened, and I gave her the complete rundown. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she told me that in her day, you asked before you spent someone else's money, and that it sounded like some people needed to learn basic manners. She also mentioned that she had given Mom $5,000 6 months ago to help with family expenses and was now wondering if that money had also gone toward party planning instead of household bills like she had intended. Meanwhile, my sister had started a GoFundMe page to help cover unexpected expenses for baby preparation, which was her way of trying to crowdsource money to pay the vendors. The page had raised about $300, mostly from family friends who didn't understand the actual situation. Dad called me on Thursday evening. He sounded tired and frustrated. He told me that Mom had been crying on and off for 3 days, that my sister was constantly stressed and calling them with updates about vendor demands, and that the whole situation was affecting his blood pressure and making him worry about his heart. He asked if we could find a way to work things out that didn't involve lawyers and formal trust arrangements and vendor disputes. He said that the family was falling apart over money, and that it wasn't worth destroying relationships over a party that was already over. I told him I appreciated his perspective, but that the issue wasn't really about the party. The issue was about respect for boundaries and consent when it came to financial decisions. I told him that if I allowed this situation to be resolved by just paying all the vendors and pretending it never happened, it would set a precedent that my money was available for family use whenever someone decided they needed it. He asked what it would take for me to consider resolving the vendor issues and helping my sister avoid collections problems while she was pregnant. I had been thinking about this for days. I told him that I would pay the vendors directly, but only under specific conditions. First, Mom and my sister would need to acknowledge in writing that they had accessed my accounts without proper authorization and that this had caused financial and emotional distress. Second, they would need to agree to formal boundaries about financial assistance going forward, with all requests being made in advance and in writing. Third, they would need to reimburse me for half of the total expenses over a payment plan, demonstrating that they understood the financial impact of their decisions. Dad was quiet for a long time. Then he asked if those conditions were negotiable. I told him they were the minimum requirements for me to consider resolving the immediate vendor crisis. I said that the alternative was for them to handle the vendor payments themselves and for our family financial arrangements to remain formally structured through legal documentation. He said he would talk to Mom and my sister and get back to me. That night, I realized that I wasn't angry anymore. I was disappointed. Disappointed that my family had thought so little of my financial autonomy that they would spend $15,000 without asking. Disappointed that when confronted with their actions, their first response was to make me feel guilty for their consequences. Disappointed that it had taken freezing accounts and legal documentation for them to take seriously the idea that my money was actually my money. But I was also relieved. For the first time in years of being this successful family member who everyone turned to for financial help, I had established clear boundaries. I had demonstrated that helping family and being taken advantage of were two different things. The decision about how this situation resolved was no longer up to me. It was up to them, and how much they valued having a relationship with me that was based on respect rather than financial convenience. 2 days later, Dad called back. He said that Mom and my sister had agreed to my conditions. They wanted to meet and sign whatever needed to be signed to resolve the vendor issues and move forward as a family. As I drove to that meeting, I realized that the real victory wasn't the money or the legal documentation. It was the fact that for the first time in my adult life, my family was going to ask before spending my money. And that was worth every uncomfortable conversation we had endured.